Welcome to today's webinar. This is the Black Remissioning webinar done in collaboration with EVA Collaborative and the Black Missional Convening. I'm Lori Ruffin, co-founder of Black Missional Convening, and I'm really excited about today's conversation. I first entered into the missional world through a church planting equipping organization, and I realized there weren't that many Black people having the conversation. So with my co-founder, Carl Johnson. We got together with some other missional leaders like Ephraim Smith and Dr. D. Stokes and started that conversation. And I've been blessed to have my life intersect with the EVA Collaborative founders and team. And so for this conversation today, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves and just share briefly about your context, and we'll jump into the conversation.
Well, yeah, I guess I can begin. I'm not muted. My name is Daryl Answer. Currently live in Kansas City, Missouri. Started a missional congregation 10 years ago called New Community Church. We actually began with some neighbors. And we've been on a journey of really leaning into this whole idea of remissioning. What does it look like for us to be missional in an African American community? If you're listening to my accent, I am not from the States. I grew up in a Black community in London. So I'm on an ongoing journey of learning, and I'm just grateful to be with you all.
Thanks so much, Daryl. So glad to have you here.
Hey everybody, I am Trishonda from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I currently serve as lead community pastor for our church, Word Tabernacle Church. But for the last 8 years, I served as the executive director for our nonprofit, which is the Reach Center, where we did a lot of work around homelessness, food insecurity, and just helping women who were in domestic violence situations. So my role has shifted in the last couple of months, where I oversee what we call Thrive Cities. Those are 8 communities in which we're going in doing missional work, where we're going in and saying, hey, what is it that these communities need, but not just what they need, what are the gifts and the talents, and how do we come alongside of those communities to make sure that they are thriving communities? And so that's my current work.
Thanks so much, Trishana. It's so good to be with you again.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Keisha Spivey, also from North Carolina. I get to serve as the executive director for Ripple Effects Group, a nonprofit organization in the area, and also the lead pastor for Awaken Church, which was birthed out of that community support. Excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Always great to be with you, Pastor Keisha. So I would love for us, as we're jumping into this conversation, let's talk about it. How do we define remissioning? And what does that look like in a historically Black context? I'm curious to know the definition and how has the remissioning process, potentially supported your ministry.
Yeah, this language has been pretty new to me over the last couple of years, but I've really grown to appreciate the depth of this remissioning conversation. I think 2 years ago, I was able to go through the EVA cohort and was introduced to this language of remissioning. So what it's looked like for me personally, and even within our framework of training that we take leaders through, it really begins with the leader. Begins with the discipleship journey of the leader, allowing us to pause and look inward, which is so important because a lot of our trainings out there are really like, how do I grow this ministry? How do I expand this ministry? How do I grow my platform and my influence? What I love about the remissioning journey is it has you look inward first. You're looking at you as a disciple in your own personal journey. So that has been really incredible. I think what it looks like in the historically Black context, I think is very similar. It's like looking at the story of the Black church. So it's not just the individual leader, but then what is the story of the historical Black church in this context? And how do we lift up the good, the powerful, the prophetic things that make us who we are? And how do we remission that in this place and at this current moment? So within the EVA Collective, like we have these competencies that we are, walk leaders through. And what I love about it is there's this emphasis on celebrating the good things. There's this emphasis on us walking with our people, going at their pace. This isn't about us trying to just bulldoze or blow anything up. but it's about walking with our people at their pace and then helping our congregations look outside the walls of the church. If you have a building, some of us don't have buildings, but to look outside and to connect with community and join what Jesus is doing in the community. So I think that's what's really looked like for me and how that has supported me in my context.
And I think for me going through this journey, it helped me, like Daryl said, is to put language to what I was sensing and what I was feeling, right? But the other thing it helped me to realize is that it wasn't about creating new programs. Because a lot of times when we get to a place where we see that something different needs to happen or we feel God shifting, we think it's a new program. And it's not necessarily a new program. It is, okay, why do we really exist? What was the original intent? What is our story? What is it that we want to say to the community? So for me, it started with understanding that it wasn't about a new program. And then it was about, like Daryl shared, it started with the leader. So I had to look within and say, okay, where have I got out of line? Where have I drifted from the original mission? And then getting back in alignment with the mission and then going outside of the walls and saying, okay, God, I see what you're doing in me. Okay, what is it that you are wanting us to do out in the community? And so when it comes to the Black church, I also think that it's just a matter of reclaiming our prophetic voice. Our Black church has a strong prophetic voice, so it is reclaiming our prophetic voice and telling our stories.
I love that. There's like an embedded return that you're talking about. It's not about laying on some kind of new program, but almost like a remember, like, what, hold on, this is who we are. Have we drifted? And
Yeah.
how do we locate ourselves on two levels as an individual leader as well as organizationally? I love that. Keisha, what else would you add? What are your reflections on that?
Well, actually, I come from a very unique space because the organization that I lead was birthed out of my frustration with the church being reduced to a and it being reduced to programs and platforms and pulpits. And so when I realized the cry of the land and the needs of the people, churches were so programmatic that they have become problems. And so instead of being the solution to the problem, we were also feeding into it. We were coming alongside with it. And so we were giving ourselves credit because we were growing in numbers. We had more buildings, we had more butts and bucks, but the income of what we were supposed to be building wasn't looking like huge. And so this initiative makes us focus and get back to kingdom, get back to mission, get back to the assignment, and to make sure that everything that you're doing is centering the main thing and not allowing the bells and whistles to start capturing your attention and not falling into the hands of what the enemy would love us to do is be deceived by metrics that don't exist.
Wow. I feel like you could just camp right there when you said our program, what is it? Our programmatics have made it problematic. That's a whole thing right there. I feel like that should be a t-shirt. That could be a message. I'm sure you would preach that. Like nobody's business. But I think you really named some really significant things. Our metrics often drive our behaviors, and it's like we don't even realize how far we've drifted by focusing on the wrong things. So I just love that you named that. All of you are serving in different contexts, in different places. I'm really curious if you can share ways that you are engaged in missional practice within your community. I really would love to hear how that's showing up for you all.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think for us, it's a very tangible response. And so it is being intentional in our communities with compassion and resources and relational care. And so when you are absent, when you're doing that, we're responding to the basic needs and to the urgent needs of people in the community. We're allowing the needs to bring mission on. We're not coming in saying, here's who we are and here's what we do. We're like, what do you do? How do we serve? How can we sit with you? How can we get to know you? This is about being with our community, not doing things for our community and not doing things in our community. And you can't be with your community without leadership. And so for us, we do that in very practical needs, through Ripple Effects Group, our nonprofit. We have a food pantry, we do resource counseling, we work with kids that are struggling in the traditional classrooms. These are needs that are very evident in our community that we're able to meet with the love of God. And so in the process of meeting needs, in the process of making sure basic needs are helping, in the process of getting to know them, they get to know us, and you don't get to know us without our Jesus. And so as we bring our mission into their mission, it's relationship. And so when life gets hard and they don't know where to turn and they don't know what to do, they're calling us because there's something about peace in the middle of a storm that they've experienced when we were in the process helping them navigate through some of that. For us, our team is committed to being the hands and feet of Jesus. And you don't get to be the hands and feet of Jesus and then sit down. Jesus was a walking ministry. He went to where the needs were. He went to where the people were. And so as an organization, that's what we do. When I finished up my doctoral program, I wrote a book called The Church Has Left the Building. Because the reality is everybody in the building already knows who we are. What about the people that don't make that? And so our job, instead of coming with them, with our church and program, we show up with love. The love of God. So
Thank you so much for those reflections. And pastorally, I'm really wondering, what does it look like to prepare a congregation for mission and community? We've seen white flight, we've seen black flight, we've seen a lot of flight, a lot of leaving. And what I'm hearing, just even in Pastor Keisha's response, was she used the word team, she used the word us. And I'm just wondering, what does it look like to, or how have each of you prepared your congregation for mission in community and with community versus to or away from?
Mhm. Well, I can speak to that, not as the senior pastor hat, but just from being on pastoral team, right? One of the ways in which we prepare our people, or you prepare your people, is Sunday mornings, right? Bible studies, small groups, making sure that as people are going out to serve the community, that they are carrying the message of Christ. And the way we understand the message of Christ is through learning the word, through sitting with the word, through studying the word. So that's one way in which we prepare our people. And the other is making sure that people understand their own spiritual gifts and talents, right? That you don't have to go out and serve the community just like I do it or like the next person do it. That God has uniquely wired you. He has uniquely gave you a gift, a talent, a passion, and then helping them to develop that. And so for us, it is making sure our people know the word of God first, and then also knowing how God has uniquely wired them and where He's calling them and their passions, and then helping them to develop and grow in that. And so for us, that's how I see us preparing our people in our congregation.
I love that. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that part of it starts with the holistic gospel of us understanding the robustness of what Jesus embodied and how he lived, and then preaching that in our spiritual formation of the congregation. And then I also heard you say highlighting the gifts that are within the congregation. So you mean to tell me that the people in the pew or in the movable seats are not there just to listen to the most important person in the oh, okay. Okay. So like God,
Man,
like really wanting everybody part to be functional.
He's called all of us. He's called all of us. But sometimes you have people that they don't understand that they have a gift. They don't understand how they could be used to do the work of Christ. And so sometimes it's our job as leaders to help them to see that. And then once they see it, help them to develop that so that they can deploy those gifts out in the community. And so sometimes they don't see it. And sometimes you have people that are so broken till they don't feel like God could use them.
Mm, that's good. That's so redemptive. I love that. That excavation, that cultivation, and then that launching and sending, and healing happening along the way. What else would you add, Daryl, Keisha?
Yeah, I think.
I want to jump in. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay, cool. I was just saying you sound real good right now, so I don't want you to lose the moment.
That's what I was doing, finding a space. I was trying to
Yeah,
find it. So
it's all good. But yeah, so I think for us, just in addition to what's already been shared, which I'm fully in agreement with, what we had to do, and I'm going back, is we had to help our people see their neighborhood through a kingdom lens. So it was as simple as going for prayer walks. And so, just a real quick story. I remember we were just starting to do these prayer walks as a result of gun violence in our community. And so, sadly, it was around this was maybe a decade ago, but it was around beginning of the school year. Unfortunately, a couple kids were killed in a home. Someone shot from outside into the home. A couple kids lost their lives. Unfortunately, it was actually two cousins. And so one of the ways we responded to that was to go to that block and connect with the folks on the block and pray. And that just led us once a month. We would go to different parts of the community. We would bring all our kids, and so it was a lot of kids. And we would just post up on corners and we would pray. And while we were praying, the question I would ask is like, what do you notice? What do you notice about the people? What do you notice about the homes? Like, what do we notice? We all live here, but like we just exist in this space. We're not really paying attention. So it was just a very practical way for us to walk the streets, have conversations with people. And it was so interesting because in those early days, some of my people will say, oh, I'll pray for these people, but I don't want to talk to them. I'll pray, we'll pray, but I don't want to have a conversation. There was a discipleship opportunity for me to help them and create opportunities for us to have conversations rather than praying on the corner. Let's take a step further. So some of these practices have been, as Trishanda said, the Sunday mornings in the Word, but then also let's pray with our feet. Let's go to some of these communities and have some conversations.
That sounds like some boots on the ground is basically what you're talking about, right? No, that's really great. Keisha, what would you add?
I would just add one of the blessings that we have is that our church was birthed out of the community center. So it is our DNA. It's who we are. It's what we do. And so when you are part of our congregation or you're part of our organization, you're not invited to serve, you're called to serve. And so kind of a lot of what Trishanda said, we're trained that we're teaching our people there's no such thing in the kingdom as leaders and lay people. We're all ambassadors. We're all ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're all called to reconcile a loving Father with a lost world. And we don't get to put down titles and say, well, this is what this person does. No, every single one of us have the same resurrection power. And so from the very beginning, from the day someone becomes a new creation, it's you weren't saved to sit. You were saved to serve. So what does your service look like for the kingdom? Your response to what you've been given is your service. To whom much is given, much is required. The life that you have just signed up for comes with some responsibilities. You're now part of your father's business. We have 3 children. And in some capacity, growing up, they were always a part of what we were doing because they were part of the family business. And so we teach, you're now a part of the family business. What's your role? What's your assignment? And that allows everyone to be uniquely different. It allows everyone to be different, but to show up authentically in who they are as they're becoming who Christ has called them to be.
I love that. You're exactly right. And I think about that on the family level as well as the local fellowship level. The phrase that we talked about in the church that I grew up in, which started out on a storefront and then for many years was in the community center in a project, public housing community, was every member a minister. Every member a minister. And it wasn't the license or the seminary degree that caused you to be able to be deployed as a part of, God's family business. So I really appreciate that. What I thought was really interesting, even after growing up in a church that really believed that and lived that, I found that when I got into the missional church space, where I joined, I found myself in a church planting, equipping organization, and realized, wow, there's a whole lexicon, there's a whole vocabulary, there are authors that have been writing on these things for a long time, and as that was happening. I realized that the primary people that were shaping that conversation were our white brothers and sisters. They had written a lot of books, and there was language that felt so different and so distant from my experience, so much that I almost didn't feel like I grew up in a missional context. And it wasn't until later that I realized, wait a minute, like the Black church historically has been a missional institution. We have never been exclusively a theologically focused entity. We were involved in things that changed the laws of the land, um, public voice, that prophetic voice around what is true, what is just, what does God require, that amplification of what is the Imago Dei, and that shared experience of a true humanity. And so, um, I'm just curious about how can we amplify this embodied missional work that exists in the Black church in a way that shifts the narrative of not feeling that one slice of the body has a corner on understanding a missional embodiment, but that actually there is a historic leading up until now, a current witness that is present, that is valid, that is it's a monument and a witness to the holistic gospel that we've been referencing. So, just curious about that. I will reflect that seeing the disconnect between the two is what led to the founding of the Black Missional Convening. I'd reached out to a buddy of mine. He's a church planner in Minneapolis. Um, and I just said, hey, I, I'm just confused. Where are the Black church planners? What is going on? This brother had opened up a grocery store. He was fighting food access issues in his community while planting a missional church. And I just said, I feel like these worlds seem so far apart. What should we do? And he's like, Lori, and his very apostolic self, we should have a conversation. We need to talk to this person, talk to that person, next talk to this person. Before I knew it, we said, okay, well, let's just set up a webinar and let's have a conversation. We'll do a conference about this. And we were like, we may have three people. There may be you, I, and the one person, or the roster of people that we invited to speak into it. We were surprised though that there were a lot of folks that were ready for that conversation, that were like, yeah, I'm here for it. I'm in a nonprofit context, or I do a social business, or I lead a church and a congregation, and I have these convictions and beliefs, and I'm living in this way, but I want to be connected with others. And so before we knew it, we found that we were stewarding a community of like-hearted people from across the country and even outside of the country who were really interested in that conversation. So we're now 3 years in. We do it in February, in Black History Month, the first Tuesday every year. But that was my journey into this, and I'm just curious, to ask you all, how can we amplify that embodied missional work that the Black church has held so long? How can we do that? Um, it, yeah, how can we do that without either abdicating that to other cultures and communities who may have built a lexicon around it? Um, yeah, just curious to know what you all think.
Uh, Well, one of the ways is sharing our stories. I have been doing just having some conversations and doing some work with a lot of Black churches in rural areas, right? And so they may be smaller Black churches, but they are doing some amazing work and God is moving. However, their stories are not being told and they don't know how. So how do we amplify the voices of these either rural small Black churches or Black churches in general to be able to share their stories, so that somebody else is not coming telling the narrative and sharing it differently, right? Because there's some amazing work being done. So how do we show them how to get on and do panels or write a book or, come to a conference and connect to different people who are doing the same work, who are African American churches. And so I think that is going to be key, is helping them to be able to shape and to share their stories in different ways, because it's some amazing, amazing work. It's just being able to tell it so that people know the work that's being done.
I want to add to that. We need to normalize the untraditional church because what COVID taught us is that all big box church models aren't necessarily developing disciples. And so, because people think unless I have 2,000 people, I have a humongous edifice, I'm not doing anything. And we gotta defunct that. We gotta allow people to start seeing that house churches, small non-traditional churches, coffee shop churches, dinner churches, things that are being very intentional with meeting people is just as much church as the person who has 3,000 people sitting in a sanctuary on Sunday. And that starts with us. And I think we've not done a very good job of celebrating the differences. I don't think we've done that. And in the process, a lot of our pastors that look like us feel like that we have to commercialize and we have to blend and we have to look like the next person for it to be reputable or to be respected. It's just a lie. I think as Black churches, when we begin to understand that the thing that makes us different is the thing that makes us dangerous, and we don't shun back from that, we lean into that. And then I rally with someone like Daryl and someone else who has a different set of skills, and we begin to work together in our efforts. I believe that's how we begin to make ripples from city to state and ultimately to the nation in Black church. Because it's not about my corner, it's not about my denomination, it's not about my way and style, it's about the impact. And so when we begin to celebrate our differences, embrace one another in their spaces and places and how they're doing ministry, and learning from each other, because there's a lot of things that non-traditional smaller churches can learn from the bigger churches, the systems, the business, there's so much that can be taught, but there's also a lot that the big churches can learn from the small boots on the ground churches that are in the community. And so we have to, I think, get to a place where we are lifetime students of ministry, lifetime students of church work, and then we grow in that together.
All of this is so good. I would just say, for me, migrating here from another country, and kind of been exposed to a lot of the missional, like mostly white male thinkers, and then being in those spaces with some of these folks, like honestly, I felt crazy a lot of times because I was just like, why are we, here's an example. Why is bivocational ministry being lifted up like it's brand new right now?
Daryl?
I've never, like, why are we writing books? What, like, there's a difference between it being a choice and a necessity. Where I grew up, it was a necessity. I never saw paid pastors until I came to America. Never heard of it. I grew up in a very small immigrant congregation, Jamaicans, folks from Africa and the Philippines, like everyone worked, right? So coming to America and it was like bivocational, all of these conversations. And I'm like, what are we doing? So I think for me, I'm learning to like reclaim my power. And I don't mean that in an arrogant sense. It's just like, no, I'm reclaiming it. It's kind of like reclaiming my time. It's kind of like we need to, as like Black missional leaders, we need to reclaim our time, reclaim our stories. And I think we have to remind each other of what's true. I think that's why these spaces are so important for us, is because the dominant culture, which is that isn't exactly dominant, but like dominant culture will have us feel crazy sometimes. Like, wait, am I off somewhere? Am I doing something wrong? And the answer is no, it's not. So I just think that's something that I'm having to remind myself, and that's why Laurie, you creating this space for Black leaders has been a gift, because it's just like other spaces you're in. When you're out there, you feel isolated, you feel alone, and then you're with people, and you're like, oh no, I'm not crazy. Oh, no, I'm not crazy. I'm really not. So yeah.
At least not all the way crazy. Partially crazy.
Partially
You have to
crazy.
be a little bit crazy to do what we do.
That's
So not
right.
all the way off the charts crazy.
That's right.
Right. It's calibrated crazy. That's what we're navigating. Kingdom crazy. No, I love that. Telling our stories, and working together, comparing notes, learning from each other, and the validation that comes with that. Sometimes when you are the other, and there's a lot of something else that's happening either culturally or norm in a normative type of space, you're right. It causes you to kind of like second guess and like, is what I'm doing valid? But yes, it is. It is. And there are other people like you. So I really like that. The other thing that really has stood out to me with this conversation is just this idea of content creation. I think that often, Black tradition, culturally, there's an oral tradition. And sometimes we're not writing things down the way that we could and should. And sometimes, we forget the stories of our grandparents. And technology has shifted, even the way that we hold our oral tradition. So it may be that we need to actually put these things in fixed form that can outlive us. So yes, we pass it relationally, but then also we put it in fixed form in order for there to be continuity to some of these practices. I think one of the things that we can borrow from even the Jewish culture in the scriptures, like talk to your children in the morning, all day. There's like an embedded rhythm of formation, just so that wherever you go, you still know who your people are, how you move, how you're different than the folks that are around you. And I think that there's an opportunity there for us to do some of that reclaiming. Daryl, I really appreciate all of what you have said. I'm curious to know, do you have a word of encouragement for Black leaders who feel isolated and, they're wanting to move beyond the walls of their church buildings and into the community, and realizing that when we say Black church, we may be speaking to someone who's in a historically Black context. We could be talking about a Black leader that's in um, a more modern or contemporary construct of church, a non-denominational context, or we could be talking about a Black leader that's leading a multi-ethnic context. And so just curious about how would you encourage, Black leaders who are feeling isolated, who want to move outside of the walls and get back into community?
I would start with saying, if that's in your heart, find someone who's already doing it. Find someone who's already in the trenches and go alongside and learn from them, serve with them, become involved in what they're doing, become a student. It really is okay to become a student of what you're seeking to do. I think so often we feel like we have to have all the answers. We got to know how to do it. We got to have the plan. And that's not the case. If I'm going to walk through a minefield, I'd much rather walk behind someone. You lead the way. Show me where to step. I don't know not to step there. And so I think humbling ourselves and finding people that are doing the work that you want to do and say, how can I serve you? I think, one of the things that has frustrated me as a leader is people come and say, will you mentor me? Will you mentor me? Can you mentor me? And I'm like, how about you come serve with me? Because anyone who's doing the work with me, they're getting the benefit of mentorship. They're getting the benefit of on the job training. And so we got to be willing to get uncomfortable and humble ourselves. Be willing to take a season to just go learn. Before you jump out into the deep, learn, ask questions, and be okay with acknowledging where your ministry is strong and where it's weak. And then you begin to see God on how to fill those gaps, and then connecting with people that are strong in those areas, and then become someone who gleans from you in the process.
I love that. And it's so similar to Jesus' model. Like he was like, hey, y'all, come follow me. I'll make you fishers of men. We're gonna roll around Galilee and all of these places, and I'm gonna do some things. I'm gonna show you, and then we're gonna talk about it after over some fish. And I would contend it was fried fish. I'm pretty sure it was fried fish, but I'm just saying, But I love that, Keisha. Trishonda, what were you gonna say?
Just know that it is perfectly okay to start small. Some people think you have to start big, you have to have all these pieces together, you have to have this and that. It is perfectly okay to start small and stay faithful. Whatever the assignment is that God has given you, stay faithful to the assignment, because that is where the fruit is going to come from. And you hear all of us say, like, you are not crazy, because sometimes God would download things to you, things you want to do, things he's telling you to go and get connected with, and you think you are crazy and that you are the only one. Trust me, it's a lot of us. You are not the only one. But I do encourage leaders to find that safe space. to connect with people where the space is safe, that you can voice what you're hearing from God, where you can learn from them, they can learn from you, because you better believe I have connected with people that I have learned from, and then I found out they're learning from me. I'm like, oh, well, I came to learn from you. Get in spaces where you can learn from one another, and just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to start small. Start small and stay faithful.
That's good. Despise not the day of small beginnings, right?
Something I've learned the hard way too, Lori. Even starting small sometimes means you start messy. Starting small and starting messy is better than not starting at all.
That's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's really good. Yeah, I just think I'm just gonna say amen to what sisters have said. Is so good. I would say for those who are feeling isolated, maybe discouraged, it's there's something about finding those who are in similar struggle but in a different place. So that's why Eva has been a gift. That's why the Black Missional Convening has been a gift. Connecting with groups of individuals who are trying to figure this out in their own context is so important. I'd also say read books by those who have gone before us, leverage technology with podcasts. I spend a lot of time listening to different preachers and just different leaders that I respect, because this work is lonely, especially when even, we are small, we are boots on the ground, but even this small community, a lot of folks are looking at me for leadership. So then it's just finding other folks and other leaders that I can learn from in different mediums. So I'll just encourage folks to find those different ways, to fill your cup, and take care of yourself. That's what I would say as well. Take care of yourself. Drink lots of water, eat some good food, and have some fun as much as you're able to.
Absolutely. Those are all great reflections. It's so important because when you do take a holistic approach to ministry, you don't have the luxury of just thinking about one thing and then you go home and live your own separate life. There's an integration. So you're getting that call when someone's having crisis. You're there. And you can't predict what it's going to be. And you're also mentoring and discipling others who are also getting the same calls. And so that rest is just so important. And I think that that kind of goes full circle to some of what we talked about earlier, just this idea that it's important to focus on the life of the leader as well as what are we doing together, as a congregation. I think it would be a good thing to just reflect on, upcoming opportunities to do some of those pieces. Eva Collaborative has a church remissioning Black caucus that is phenomenal. I have been through Eva Collaborative's remissioning experience. And it is just so enriching, partly because there's so many different leaders who come from different contexts. And there's that you're comparing notes, not comparing for competition, but like, how do you deal with this? How do you navigate that? Oh, yeah, I'm gonna try that. This is good. And wrestling with these different pieces together in a safe space where there is understanding of culture and being able to figure out how do we honor the past while innovating for the future, while tending to our souls who are taking heat from all kinds of different directions internally within our context as well as in society as a whole. And so I just love that this is a resource for missional leaders. It is a 6-month learning experience and it happens in community with Black coaches. And I love that there's an opportunity to join one soon, right around the corner in September. And if that time doesn't align, it cycles. And so I just would encourage everyone to check that experience out. It is virtual, which makes it accessible, but then it's also in person. I love that part of the experience is to go into a city, boots on the ground, and actually see how is this missional leader engaging their community. We have been to Philly, we've been to DC, and it's been amazing to literally walk the streets, to meet the restaurant owners, to meet the people in the community who are in relationship with the different missional leaders. And then, of course, it would be great for everyone to come to the annual Black Missional Convening. It's 4 hours online, and that happens the first Tuesday in February of each year. And we take on a different topic. It is not a conference. We don't just hear from leaders about their expertise. We do hear that, but we talk with each other. We chop it up and we process these things peer to peer. And it's always very enriching. And then, of course, you've got the CCDA, Christian Community Development Association, that has been in this work for a long time, founded by Dr. John Perkins. It's great to see his enduring work where he talks about how are we as Christians present to our communities? How are we building with and from versus going to? And so there's an annual conference that moves from city to city. I'm happy to know that in 2026, we're going to be in my city in Richmond, Virginia. So these are different spaces to connect with like-minded people, to be able to build, to share best practices, to pray together, cry together, brainstorm, innovate together. And so I love that. And then I think the remissioning intensive is going to be in Kansas City this year, right? Yes, and so that's where Daryl leads, and to see the work that I've been in his neighborhood, in his home, in the restaurants where people know him by name, and his wife and family, and again, it's just beautiful to see that work. So before long, we have to jump down to North Carolina, Trishanda, to where there's the land of good sweet tea, and
Next
see what's
year.
happening in North Carolina.
Next year will be in North Carolina.
26.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. That's so good. Well, so I'm really excited. This has been a great conversation. I just want to continue to encourage us to keep going. There's so much that we can pull from within our Black church context that will help us, our churches, our community, our young people, and not just that, but also the broader church. Sometimes you need an example for what does this look like. You don't actually need to create anything new because there is a blueprint of what this looks like, and I'm happy to say that that blueprint is within the Black church. I mean, it's just documented, and I think we're just in the process of remembering and reminding folks that actually don't know that there's so much treasure there that can actually give direction for what the church needs right now, in the Black community and beyond. So, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your leadership, your friendship. It's like really just valuable and beautiful. So,
Thank you.
greetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Mhm.
Yes. Amen.